I was brushing my hair before bed when the text lit up the dark room, its glow slicing through the stillness the way cold wind slips under a doorframe. It was nearly 11:30 at night. Too late for any message that started softly, and this one didn't. 3 lines. No greeting, no explanation, no kindness. Maya, don't come tomorrow. Scarlett feels uncomfortable around you. It's better for the family if you sit this one out. For a moment I just stared, letting the words sink, then drag, then cut. Uncomfortable around me? The Christmas party I had paid for? The venue I reserved, the wine I pre-ordered, the private room I decorated with gold-white accents because Mom said she wanted something elegant this year? My own family asking me not to attend a dinner I funded felt like stepping outside my own life and watching someone quietly lock the door from the inside. Something in me stilled. Not anger, not grief yet, just a cold, clean click of realization. I didn't reply. I didn't ask why. I simply scrolled to the restaurant's number, pressed call, and when the manager answered cheerfully, I said, "Cancel everything. The person paying just got removed from the list." The silence after that felt like fresh snow, crisp, untouched, and terrifyingly honest. I set the phone on the counter and stood there, feeling the quiet fill the kitchen. It was strange how a message so short could feel like an entire childhood collapsing. I walked to the living room, turned on the small lamp by the couch, and sat down, staring at the string lights I'd never gotten around to taking down since last year. They flickered softly, casting the room in a gentle glow that felt almost mocking. I knew instantly this wasn't about a sudden misunderstanding. Families don't eject you from Christmas overnight. This was the final step of something that had been building for years, slow, subtle, and always wrapped in the same excuse. Scarlett is sensitive. My whole life had been shaped around that sentence. She was the fragile one, the emotional one, the one people tiptoed around. I was the steady one, the strong one, the one Mom praised for not making things harder. All that praise had turned into obligation, and all that obligation had turned into expectation. But seeing it spelled out, "Don't come," made a truth rise in me I couldn't ignore anymore. I opened my laptop. The screen lit the room with a harsher, truer light. My cursor hovered over a file I hadn't touched in months. Household expenses, not shared.xlx. The name alone made something tighten in my chest. I clicked. Rows of numbers filled the screen, tiny and relentless. Years of receipts, payments, transfers, everything I'd quietly covered because someone had to. Scarlett's overdue utility bills, Mom's dental work, Dad's medication, rent payments when Scarlett forgot, emergency repairs for a car she crashed and never apologized for. Thousands of small rescues hidden inside a spreadsheet no one else had ever seen. Scrolling felt like walking backward through my own life, tripping over every moment I'd let slide. There was a flagged red line I barely remembered creating. Second mortgage, unknown signature. I stared at it until the words blurred. I'd seen something months ago that didn't sit right, something about dates or signatures, but I'd been too tired to dig deeper, too used to carrying everything, too accustomed to believing it was my responsibility to fix things quietly, to keep the peace. I closed my eyes and leaned back. Suddenly I was 13 again, standing in the hallway while Mom soothed Scarlett after another meltdown. "Don't upset her, Maya. You know how she is." Or 17 when I picked Scarlett up after she hit someone's car and Mom whispered, "Just be gentle, she's fragile." Or 20 when Dad lost his job and said, "We're fine," while the mortgage slipped behind and the house teetered on the edge of foreclosure. I was the one who called the bank. I was the one who wired the payment. I was the one who saved the house. And yet, here I was, uninvited from Christmas. The apartment around me grew quieter as these memories settled, not painfully, but with a kind of clarity I hadn't felt before. I wasn't angry, not yet. What I felt was the slow unfurling of truth I had buried under responsibility, under guilt, under the illusion that being dependable meant being loved. My phone buzzed again, but I ignored it. I didn't need to read another message telling me why my presence was inconvenient. I had spent years being convenient. I stood and walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and noticed my hand wasn't shaking. That surprised me. Instead of collapsing, I felt steady. More steady than I ever had while playing that role for them. It was as if the message had unclipped something heavy I'd been dragging for years. The file on my laptop glowed faintly from across the room. I walked back and scrolled further down the list, scanning years of quiet contribution. Scarlett's failed classes, Mom's seasonal medications, Dad's forgotten insurance payments. I could trace my life through these numbers more clearly than any family photo album. Somewhere between scrolling and breathing, I realized Christmas wasn't the first time they had removed me. It was simply the first time they said it out loud. I closed the spreadsheet slowly, letting the lid fall shut with a soft click. I sat in the dim light, listening to the faint hum of the heater, feeling the weight of the night settle around me. This wasn't loneliness. It wasn't even heartbreak. It was recognition, cold, clear, impossible to ignore. Tomorrow wouldn't be the Christmas they expected. It would be the Christmas I finally opened my eyes. I woke later than usual, the kind of sleep that doesn't refresh so much as it lets the body shut down for a while. The light creeping through the blinds was soft and cold, the kind of winter sun that didn't really warm anything. My phone lay face down on the nightstand. No missed calls, no messages asking if I was okay. Nothing from Mom, nothing from Dad, and certainly nothing from Scarlett. For a moment, I lay still, listening to the silence. It was strange how quickly a family could make someone feel like a ghost. The group chat pinged twice while I brushed my teeth. A sticker of a cartoon Christmas tree from Scarlett, a heart emoji from Mom underneath it. No one asked where I was. No one mentioned the cancellation. No one seemed to notice the absence of the person who'd paid for the entire celebration. I stared at the little thread of messages and felt something small shift inside me. It wasn't pain anymore. It was clarity. I walked into the living room, sat on the carpet, and opened my laptop again. The spreadsheet appeared like muscle memory. Rows of numbers, dates, notes. All the pieces of my life I had tried to keep orderly while everyone else scattered theirs to the wind. The earliest entries were tiny, almost cute in hindsight. Gas money for Dad when his truck wouldn't start. $50 for Scarlett's forgotten school fee. $85 for a utility bill Mom swore she'd already paid but somehow didn't. Small rescues, small sacrifices. All so normal back then. Scrolling through those early years felt like flipping through an old diary. The version of me that still believed stepping in was love, that being dependable meant being wanted. I paused at an entry from when I was 20. Mortgage relief, $5,800, urgent. I remembered the phone call, Mom pretending to be calm, Dad saying they'd figure it out, the panic underneath every word. I had driven home that weekend and paid the arrears without telling them I had to drain most of what I'd saved. I thought saving their house back then meant anchoring us as a family. I didn't know I was just reinforcing the story they'd spent my whole life telling me. Scarlett was the fragile one, and I was the strong one. Scarlett needed protecting. I was the protector. Scarlett caused chaos. I cleaned it up. And the wildest part? I didn't even resent it at the time. I believed it. I believed that being steady was my role. Something noble, something chosen. Not something assigned to me before I was old enough to understand the weight of it. I scrolled forward a few years. Scarlett's name began appearing more often. Car insurance lapses, community college fees for classes she never finished, a $400 makeup haul that hit her overdraft and somehow landed in my lap to fix. She'd always laugh it off. Mom always sighed and asked, "Just this once." It was never once. I closed my eyes and let the memories surface. Scarlett crying because she failed a midterm she barely studied for. Mom telling me not to say anything upsetting. Scarlett getting pulled over and calling me, not Mom, not Dad, me, to come pick her up. I remembered driving out in the middle of the night because no one else thought they should. "You're the strong one," Mom always said, the compliment that turned into a chain. I shook off the memory and returned to the spreadsheet. The more recent entries were darker, numbers climbing, notes vague and rushed. Rent payments when Scarlett moved into an apartment she couldn't afford. Charges from boutiques I'd never set foot in. Medical bills Mom insisted weren't a big deal, but still somehow ended up on my card because insurance mixed something up. Scrolling through it felt like watching a slow leak flood an entire house. By the time I reached the last 2 years, the pattern was undeniable. The expenses weren't small anymore. They weren't mistakes or oversights. They were expectations, quiet ones, unspoken ones, the kind people build entire family structures around. I clicked on the red-flagged entry, "Second mortgage, unknown signature." I zoomed in, studying the image. It was just a fuzzy preview, the kind of photo someone takes in a rush. The signature was supposed to be Dad's, but the curve of the R was wrong. The slant was wrong. Everything about it was wrong. A chill ran through me. I tried to remember when I flagged it. Had it been last spring, last summer? I remembered noticing the mismatch, remembering thinking something didn't add up. But I must have let it slide. Too many fires to put out, too many emergencies labeled just this once. My mind flickered back to another memory, one I hadn't thought about in years. I was 17, and Scarlett had crashed a borrowed car. Mom panicked and begged me, "Please don't tell your father how it happened. He can't handle it right now." Dad, when he found out, didn't yell at Scarlett. He looked at me and said, "Could you cover the repair until we get things sorted?" I did. Of course I did. Now, staring at that second mortgage line, I felt an old truth rising. Every time they needed someone to absorb a mistake, they picked me. Every time they needed someone to hide a mess, they turned to me. And every time Scarlett needed an escape, they used me as the cushion. I scrolled again. Next were hundreds of small transactions, but they told a bigger story. Scarlett was living far above her means. Designer skincare, petty travel expenses, Uber charges at 2 a.m, grocery store runs at boutique locations nowhere near her apartment. I remembered Mom once saying, "Scarlett is creative with her money." No, Scarlett was creative with mine. A sharp ache spread through my chest. Not heartbreak, but recognition. This was not new. This was not surprising. It was simply the first time I was allowing myself to see it without softening the edges. I closed the laptop for a moment and rubbed my face. The room was quiet except for the heater humming. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, a sound I usually found comforting. Now it just reminded me how many years had passed while I stood still to keep everyone else steady. I picked up the laptop again, scrolling to Christmas seasons of the past. Little notes I'd forgotten writing. Baked goods for Scarlett's office party. Covered Mom's gift exchange. Paid deposit for Christmas dinner 2021. Scarlett overdraft, again. Then I remembered something else. A Christmas 2 years ago when I arrived early and heard Mom and Scarlett whispering in the dining room. "Don't leave that out," Mom had said. "If Maya sees it, she'll ask questions." They had gone silent when I stepped inside. When I asked if everything was okay, Scarlett had said, "Don't worry about it. You worry too much." I had believed them. Now that memory hit me like a slow-moving truck. They weren't hiding a surprise or a gift. They were hiding bills, debts, evidence. I leaned back against the couch, the realization landing cleanly. They had been removing me from parts of the family long before they dared remove me from Christmas. My phone buzzed again, vibrating against the table. I ignored it. There was nothing left they could say tonight that I needed to hear. The spreadsheet glowed from the screen, a quiet record of 14 years of being the strong one while they built an entire ecosystem around Scarlett's comfort and my silence. It wasn't an accusation, it was a mirror. And for the first time, I was allowing myself to look straight into it. My eyes drifted back to the red-flagged line near the bottom. If that mortgage signature wasn't Dad's, then who signed it? And if they hid that from me, what else had they decided I didn't need to know? The thought settled in my chest. Heavy, but clear. Whatever this was, whatever they had been doing behind my back, it went deeper than Christmas, deeper than money, deeper than favoritism. It was a pattern, one I had been too loyal, too hopeful, or too tired to see. Not anymore. I sat in the kitchen with both hands wrapped around a mug I wasn't drinking from, staring at the faint condensation sliding down its side. The apartment was silent, except for the steady ticking of the wall clock, each click landing like a reminder that time had been moving, even when I'd been too busy holding everyone else together to feel it. The red-flagged line from the spreadsheet, second mortgage, unknown signature, hovered in my thoughts like a warning I had ignored. Now that I'd seen it again, I knew I wouldn't be able to look away. I set the mug down and opened my email, intending to distract myself. But my eyes froze on a message buried inside an old folder, an unread email from last year. The subject line read, "Clarification needed." It was from a loan officer at a local Missouri bank. I felt the same chill I felt when I found that mortgage entry. I clicked the email. It was short, polite, and terrifying. "Please confirm the guarantor information for your relative's application." My name was listed beneath guarantor. I never responded. I hadn't even seen it. Scarlett must have thought she got lucky that time. Maybe she assumed she could get lucky again. I leaned back in the chair, feeling my pulse rise. All the little moments I'd shrugged off began lining up in my mind like pieces of a puzzle. Moments I'd brushed away to keep the peace. Moments that now took on a darker meaning. I thought of Mom's voice years ago, hushed and hurried, telling me, "You don't need to worry about the bills." Back then, I thought she meant she didn't want to stress me out. Now I realized she didn't want me asking questions. And I thought of Scarlett, smiling like a child who never had to face consequences, dropping hints I never took seriously. Once, she'd held my credit card while I paid for groceries and said, "This limit is so good, Maya. I can't even imagine having one like this." At the time, I had laughed nervously and said nothing. Now that memory felt like a warning. I exhaled slowly. Scarlett's lifestyle had never matched her income. Designer skincare, last-minute weekend trips, new shoes every season. When I asked how she afforded any of it, Mom always had a ready-made answer. "She gets discounts. Her friends treat her. She's resourceful." But nothing about Scarlett's spending habits had ever been resourceful, and certainly nothing about the boutique charges I saw in my spreadsheet, charges from a store less than a mile from her apartment, had anything to do with creativity. Those payments weren't mine by accident. They were mine because someone wanted them to be. A fresh memory crept forward, one I hadn't been able to shake since I'd rediscovered it. A package delivered to my apartment 2 years ago, a high-end serum worth far more than I would ever spend on skincare. The shipping label had my last name, but Scarlett's first name. I'd texted her then, asking if she meant to send it to me. She'd replied, "Oops, my mistake," with a laughing emoji. Now I understood it wasn't a mistake, it was a test. A small one, a rehearsal. I got up and paced the length of the kitchen, the movement grounding me. I could picture Scarlett, hands trembling with excitement as she filled out forms using bits of my information, testing boundaries the way a child tests an electric fence, pushing until something stops them. But nothing ever stopped Scarlett. Not Mom, not Dad, and not me, because I was too busy being the steady one. My heart tightened as the next memory surfaced. The Mother's Day dinner 2 years ago. I had arrived early, carrying a bouquet of tulips and a cake from the bakery Dad liked. As I walked toward the dining room, I heard Mom whisper sharply, "Don't leave the paperwork out. She'll ask questions." The room had gone silent when I walked in. Scarlett had smiled too quickly, her voice too bright, asking me about work, about the weather, about anything except what they'd just been discussing. I had pretended not to notice. They had pretended nothing was wrong. Now I wondered what paperwork I wasn't supposed to see. I walked back to my laptop and clicked the spreadsheet open again. More lines, more numbers, more clues I had missed. Then another memory struck me. Scarlett's emergency room visit 3 years ago. She'd fainted during a late-night party and someone had driven her to urgent care. Mom called me, panicked, asking if I could come down because Scarlett needs you. When the hospital asked for insurance information, Scarlett had handed over my card. I had snatched it back, embarrassed, and paid the bill myself just to get everyone out of the waiting room faster. I never asked how Scarlett ended up with my card. I never asked why Mom didn't stop her. I was too tired, too used to fixing things. Now the exhaustion I felt wasn't from fixing things. It was from realizing how many things I'd let slip through my fingers while trying to be the good daughter. I opened another file, old emails Scarlett had sent me. One stood out, a wrong attachment from 2 years ago. A form with sections blank, a loan application, the guarantor line erased, the cursor blinking where a name should have been. She had sent it to me by accident, then immediately texted, "Ignore that! OMG, wrong file, lol." She hadn't been wrong. She had been rehearsing. My hands felt cold. I rubbed them together. The room felt too still, as though the truth was thickening the air. I remembered Dad, too. His silence. Not hostile, not neglectful, just defeated. The way he'd step in only to step back again, letting Mom orchestrate everything. His signature on the refinance documents I helped pay off when I was 22 hadn't looked shaky back then. Not like the signature in the flagged line of the spreadsheet, the slanted letters, the uncertain strokes. It didn't match. I wasn't someone easily fooled by handwriting. I'd signed enough documents for all of them to know the difference between someone's hand and someone's attempt. I sat down again, suddenly drained. The heater hummed steadily. Outside, the street was quiet, coated in winter light. Inside me, something was shifting, something fragile cracking open, making room for truth I had refused to see. Being steady had always been treated like a compliment, but now I saw it for what it was: training. Training to stay quiet, training to carry the weight, training to not question, training to be the one who cleaned up the mess, paid the bills, fixed the crises, absorbed the consequences. I thought about Scarlett's voice the last time she snapped at me. "Why do you always make everything a big deal?" As if responsibility was drama. As if asking questions was betrayal. As if I existed to hold her world together. Another memory surfaced from years earlier. Scarlett, 17, sobbing in the back seat after she'd backed Dad's car into a mailbox. Mom had fussed over her, cooing, "It's okay, honey, Maya will handle it." I had driven the car to the repair shop. I had paid the bill. Scarlett had never apologized. Instead, she'd kissed my cheek and said, "You're the best, seriously." I didn't feel like the best now. I felt like someone who'd been played so expertly I didn't know where my own intentions ended and their expectations began. I looked back at the spreadsheet. The numbers told a story. My memories filled in the rest. I thought of Dad again. The way he'd grip the edge of the kitchen counter when he was nervous. The way he always avoided looking at me directly when finances came up. The way he said, "We're managing," as if managing meant hiding documents in drawers and hoping I wouldn't notice until it was too late. I wondered if he'd tried to stop anything. I wondered if he even knew how deep it went. A realization flickered through me. Mom and Scarlett had been controlling the information flow for years. They had built an entire system around keeping me out of the loop while keeping me in the role of fixer. I wasn't completely sure who had forged what, or who had approved what. But I knew one thing. The truth wasn't an accident. It was a pattern. My chest tightened again, but this time not from fear, from understanding. I closed the laptop gently, feeling the weight of 14 years settle into one thought. This wasn't something that happened overnight. This wasn't about Christmas. This wasn't even about money. It was about the way my family had trained me to disappear behind my usefulness. It was about the way they had rewritten the story of who I was supposed to be. I stood up slowly, breathing in the cold stillness of the room. They had removed me from Christmas. But long before that, they had removed me from the truth. And now that I could finally see that truth clearly, I knew something else too. I wasn't going to let them hide anything from me ever again. The envelope wasn't where I'd left it. I stood in the kitchen with the drawer open, staring at the empty space where that off-white rectangle had been tucked under a stack of takeout menus. For a moment, I wondered if I'd imagined it, if the exhaustion of the past few days had twisted my memory. But no, Dad had handed it to me last June, sliding it across my counter with a quiet, almost solemn look I hadn't known how to read. "Open it when you need to," he'd said. I hadn't needed anything that day. I did now. I checked the other drawers, then the basket on top of the fridge, then the shelf above the microwave where I kept spare chargers and batteries. Nothing. A strange unease crept up my spine. Who would have moved it? No one had been in my apartment. No one except me. I forced myself to slow down, breathe, and think. Dad had placed it on the counter. I'd tucked it into my paperwork box, old tax returns, expired warranties, manuals I never read. I opened the closet and pulled the box onto the floor. A few folders slid out. Behind them, nestled at the bottom like something that had been hiding from me, was the envelope. My hands weren't steady when I picked it up. The paper felt softer than I remembered, worn at the edges as though time had been working on it quietly. My name was written on the front in Dad's handwriting, neat but slightly shaky, the way it had become over the past couple of years. Maya. Just that. No note, no hint. I sat at the dining table, the envelope cold against my fingertips, and let the weight of the moment settle. Dad wasn't a man who shared feelings, let alone wrote them down. If he'd put something in writing, it meant he didn't trust himself to say it out loud. Or maybe he didn't trust the house, Mom, Scarlett, to let him say it. I slid a finger under the flap and opened it slowly. Inside was a stack of papers clipped together and a small lined note folded twice over. The clip trembled slightly in my hands as I lifted the first page. Bank statements. The transactions were small at first. $60, $85, $120. Grocery stores, pharmacies, convenience shops. Then larger withdrawals. $800 at a boutique near Scarlett's apartment. $1,400 from an auto repair shop I didn't recognize. A transfer for $350 to a store Scarlett used to tag on Instagram. I swallowed hard. My name wasn't on any of these accounts, but I knew my money had indirectly covered half of them. Every time Mom came to me saying things were tight this month, every time Scarlett had cried about a bad patch, I'd stepped in without asking questions. I'd assumed the money went where they said it did. It hadn't. I kept flipping. Receipts were stapled to the pages. Notes in Dad's handwriting appeared in the margins. Tiny, cramped, as if he'd written them late at night, afraid someone might see. Needed for Scarlett. Covering until she gets back on her feet. Janet said she'd handle. Then a sentence circled twice. Can't let Maya know, she's done enough. My throat burned. I picked up the next page. It was a printed email between Dad and a financial advisor. The subject line made my stomach drop. Refinance options. I read. The advisor warned that refinancing again might be risky. Dad wrote that the last payment had been missed because Scarlett promised she would take care of it. Another line. Janet thinks keeping Maya out of it is best. She has her own life. I squeezed the paper so tightly it wrinkled around my fingers. They had been drowning, and instead of calling the daughter who saved their home once, they turned to the daughter who drowned them. I unfolded the small note last. Dad's handwriting filled the center of the page, shaky but deliberate. Maya, I made mistakes. Your mother too. We thought we were protecting her. I don't know how to undo what's been done. You deserve to know. Please take care of yourself. Simple, heavy, a confession without details, an apology without cure. But the bottom of the note held a line scratched out with force. There's something else. Ask me when you're ready. My fingertips grazed the ink. The words were still faintly visible beneath the hard strokes of the pen. Something else? Something bigger than the refinance? Bigger than the loans? Bigger than the deception woven through every part of my financial history? I looked back at the stack of documents. Patterns emerged like bruises under dim light. Scarlett's spending, Mom's excuses, Dad's silence, and me, always there, always covering, always fixing, always the steady one. They had relied on me to hold the ground steady beneath their feet even as they dug the holes deeper. My chest tightened as another memory surfaced. Dad standing in the garage last summer, shuffling envelopes, looking exhausted in a way that frightened me. I'd asked if he needed help. He'd said no, he'd insisted. But now, seeing the dates on these papers, I knew he had lied. Or maybe he hadn't been allowed to tell me the truth. I flipped another page and froze. Attached to the back was a printout of a loan application. My name was typed in the top corner, not as applicant, but as guarantor. The space for signature was blank, but someone had practiced copying my signature in the margins, over and over, variations of my name, my initials, written in hesitant strokes that didn't belong to me. My breath caught. I knew that handwriting. It was Scarlett's. The loops on the Y's, the uneven slant on the M. They matched her notes from high school, her grocery lists, the way she used to sign her name on birthday cards. I pressed my hand to my forehead. The room felt smaller. Everything I'd suspected in the last 48 hours suddenly crystallized into something undeniable. Scarlett hadn't just been careless. She hadn't just been irresponsible or emotional or overwhelmed. She had been preparing, testing boundaries, practicing, and someone, Mom, Dad, both, had been enabling her, hiding it, cushioning the fallout. I gathered the papers into a neat stack, even though my hands were shaking. I couldn't let myself fall apart. Not yet. There was too much I didn't understand, too much that had been hidden from me. The answers weren't in this envelope alone. They were scattered in the years behind me, years I had spent solving problems without knowing I was one of the problems they wanted to solve in secret. I sat still for a long moment, letting the truth settle into the space around me. The refrigerator hummed. A car door shut outside. Life continued as if nothing inside my apartment had shifted, as if nothing in my family had cracked open. I closed the envelope and stood, letting the weight of it rest in my palm. My parents had been protecting someone all these years. But it wasn't me, and it wasn't themselves. It was Scarlett. And if they had gone this far to keep me from seeing the truth, I could only imagine how much further the lies might reach. I walked to the window, watching the snow drift down in quiet spirals. My reflection stared back, tired, shaken, but suddenly awake in a way I hadn't been for years. Whatever this was, whatever something else Dad had scratched out of his note, I was going to find it, and I wasn't going to let them hide another thing from me again. I woke on Christmas Eve long before the sun rose, the kind of early morning that feels like a mistake. My body was exhausted, but my mind had been awake since 3, replaying every line in the documents from Dad's envelope, every red flag in my spreadsheet, every memory I had once softened so I could keep loving the people who caused it. By the time the weak daylight crept in, I gave up on sleep and moved to the kitchen, where the quiet felt too loud. I made coffee out of habit more than desire. The scent filled the room, warm and familiar, but I couldn't bring myself to take a sip. I stared at the steam rising from the mug, thinking about the text Mom sent the night before. Don't come to the party, 3 lines sharp enough to slice through years of unspoken obligations. It should have hurt more. Instead, it felt like the final piece of proof. My laptop still sat open on the table from the night before, its screen dimmed but not asleep. When I tapped the keys, the spreadsheet blinked back to life. Endless rows of what I had paid for, what I had covered, what I had been responsible for without anyone acknowledging it. For a moment, I just stared at the columns, letting the glow illuminate the dark kitchen like a quiet interrogation light. Then my phone buzzed, a voicemail notification. Unknown number. Timestamp, 2 weeks ago. My stomach tightened. I pressed play. A man's voice, professional but warm, filled the room. Hi, this is Tom Reeves from First Capital Credit Union. I'm calling for Maya Hartman. I just wanted to confirm a cosign request submitted on October 30th for a new personal line of credit listed under Scarlett Hartman. If you could give us a call back to verify authorization, we'd appreciate it. He listed a number, thanked me, ended the call. I sat frozen. Scarlett had tried to open a loan with my name attached and hadn't even bothered to tell me. Not even a text. Nothing. She had simply submitted my identity as a resource to her bank like she was ordering takeout. A slow wave of cold swept through me. I replayed the voicemail, once, twice, a third time. The tone didn't change, but the meaning grew heavier. The bank had paused the application only because they couldn't reach me. If I had picked up a spam call or responded without thinking, the loan might already be active. My signature, faked, my credit, risked, my life, treated like a spare key she could take without asking. I opened my email again and searched my spam folder on impulse. A series of messages popped up, the earliest from nearly a year ago. Thank you for your application. Please confirm your interest. Final attempt to reach you regarding your credit request. All addressed to me, all referring to applications I had never filed. My hands shook. Scarlett had been doing this longer than I realized. I clicked through the emails, each one a quiet betrayal wrapped in polite corporate language. One message even listed the verification phone number she'd used, my number, but off by one digit. A trick, a workaround. She had intentionally made herself the reachable contact so the calls wouldn't come to me. I pressed a hand to my forehead as the reality settled, sharp and undeniable. Scarlett didn't accidentally use my name. She didn't misunderstand paperwork. She didn't panic or make a one-time mistake. She had planned this. She had practiced. She had assumed I would never notice. I opened the spreadsheet again, scanning the years of financial patches I had made for them. Rent payments, grocery runs, overdrafts, medical bills, repairs they didn't want to deal with. So many emergencies that were just moments when someone didn't feel like taking responsibility. And Scarlett, always Scarlett, hovered at the center of it. Emotionally fragile, financially reckless, spiritually allergic to accountability. I had spent years absorbing the fallout of her choices because Mom said she needed protecting. Now I realized Scarlett wasn't fragile. She was entitled. The kind of entitled that grows roots when a family waters it with excuses. I closed the laptop and stared out the window. Snow had begun to fall, soft and quiet, landing on the sill like tiny white confessions. For a brief moment, I felt everything and nothing at once. Christmas Eve used to mean waking early, prepping dishes, organizing car rides, making sure Dad took his medication, making sure Mom didn't forget the gifts, making sure Scarlett didn't spiral into another meltdown. It used to mean responsibility, obligation, work disguised as love. This year, I wasn't invited. And for the first time, I wasn't desperate to fix it. I needed answers, not invitations. I grabbed my phone and called the number from the voicemail. My heart thudded hard in my chest as the line rang. First Capital Credit Union. This is Alex, a cheerful voice answered. Hi, I said, steadying my breath. I received a call about a cosign request under my name. I'd like more information. Sure, one moment. Typing, paper shuffling. Then a pause long enough to confirm my fear. Yes, I see it here, he said. A personal line of credit, submitted by a Scarlett Hartman. She noted that you were traveling, so she gave us an alternate number to reach you. I felt my stomach turn. Did you receive a signature? I asked. We did receive a scan, but I'll be honest, it didn't look fully consistent. That's why we tried to reach you directly. My fingers tightened around the phone. He hesitated before adding quietly, You should probably check your credit report, ma'am. I thanked him and hung up, my throat thick. Scarlett had forged my name. The truth landed like a slow, painful exhale. This wasn't clumsiness. This wasn't immaturity. This was fraud. I sat on the edge of the couch, letting the silence stretch. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, the truth kept forming. Scarlett had pushed me out of Christmas not because she felt uncomfortable, but because she didn't want me near when the fallout arrived, when the bank called, when the forged signature was flagged, when Mom and Dad realized she'd dug a hole they couldn't charm their way out of. They needed me out of the picture, out of the conversation, out of the room. Scarlett had always assumed my silence was her safety net. But silence wasn't safety. It was permission, and I had been granting it for far too long. I stood up slowly, breath steadying as a new clarity settled over me. I wasn't going to confront Scarlett today. I wasn't going to call Mom. I wasn't going to beg anyone to explain why they thought I deserved to be used. I was going to protect myself. I grabbed my keys, my coat, and the folder with everything. Dad's note, the mortgage printout, the emails, the spreadsheet. As I slipped on my boots, a name surfaced in my mind like a small spark of memory. Nina Gresham, the attorney my coworker once mentioned, the one who specialized in financial exploitation and family asset protection. I opened the drawer by the door and dug through old papers until I found her business card, tucked between a dry cleaning receipt and a warranty form. I held it up to the light. A handwritten note at the bottom read, "Call me if they're using you." The snow kept falling outside, soft and unhurried. Tomorrow I would call her, and for the first time in my life I wouldn't be calling to fix my family. I would be calling to protect myself from them. The wind outside was sharp enough to make the windows groan when I woke the morning after Christmas, but the air inside my apartment felt strangely still, like the world was holding its breath with me. I lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, aware of the heaviness in my chest, but also of something else, something quieter. Resolve. No new messages, no apology, not even a question asking if I was okay. Of course there wasn't. My family had spent years pretending my feelings were a luxury they couldn't afford. I got out of bed, made coffee I barely tasted, and sat at the table with the business card I'd dug out of the drawer the night before. The name printed on it felt heavier now. Nina Gresham, Financial and Family Asset Protection Attorney. Underneath, the handwritten line stared back at me. "Call me if they're using you." What an easy sentence for someone else to write. What a lifetime of weight those 5 words carried for me. I dialed. The phone rang twice before a calm, clipped voice answered. "Law Office of Nina Gresham." My throat tightened. "Hi, my name is Maya Hartman. I think I need help." There was a pause, not suspicious, not impatient, just listening. "Are you available today?" I asked. "Come in at 10, the assistant replied. "Bring any documents you have." I checked the clock. It was 8:40, 2 hours to gather 14 years. I moved through my apartment, pulling papers into a stack. The envelope from Dad, the mortgage printouts, the screenshots from my spreadsheet, the emails Scarlett had sent by mistake, the voicemail recording from the credit union. Every piece of evidence felt like a brick I'd carried without knowing. When I finally zipped the folder closed, it felt almost too heavy to lift. The drive across town was quiet. The snow from yesterday had turned to frost, the streets pale and slick. I kept replaying my conversation with the credit union rep, his careful tone when he said the signature didn't look consistent. That phrase had looped in my mind all night. Scarlett had signed my name. Scarlett had used my information. Scarlett had assumed, expected, that I wouldn't find out. The building where Nina's office was located sat on a side street near the courthouse district, an old Victorian converted into offices. It was tall, with white trim and wide windows that let in the winter light, the kind of place that felt like it had seen too much truth to be impressed by anything. I walked up the steps, clutching the folder. My breath fogged in the cold. Inside, the office smelled faintly of lemon polish and paper. A woman at the desk looked up, offered a small, knowing smile, and motioned for me to sit. Before I could, a door opened. "Maya?" a voice called. I turned. Nina was shorter than I expected, somewhere in her 50s, with dark hair streaked silver and eyes sharp enough to cut glass. She didn't shake my hand. She just gestured toward her office like she'd been expecting me for months, not minutes. "Come," she said, "let's talk." Her office was simple. No family photos, no clutter, just a large desk, clean lines, and a lamp casting soft light across the surface. "Tell me what brought you here," she said. For the first time in days, I exhaled without feeling like I might break. I told her everything: the Christmas message, the voicemail from the bank, the forged credit application, the envelope from my father, the refinance, the bills, the pattern, the silence, the expectation, the exhaustion. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. My voice stayed steady, not because I wasn't hurting, but because the hurt had calcified into truth. Nina listened without interrupting, her fingers resting lightly on a pen she never used. When I finished, she nodded once, not in surprise, but in recognition. "What you're describing," she said, "is not a misunderstanding. It is patterned financial and emotional exploitation." My breath caught. Patterned exploitation. Words I had never let myself consider. "You've been acting as a financial caregiver," she continued, "unpaid, unacknowledged, and likely manipulated into silence. Your family has learned you won't say no, so they stopped giving you chances to say it." I swallowed hard. "It isn't your fault," she added. Something inside me buckled. I hadn't realized how much I needed someone, anyone, to say that. Nina reached for the folder I had placed on her desk. She didn't rush. She spread the documents into neat rows, skimming each page, her eyes sharp and unreadable. Mortgage statements, bank withdrawals, the forged signature, Scarlett's scribbled notes, the envelope from Dad. She tapped one paper lightly. "Here," she said, "this is illegal." Her finger moved to another. "This, too." Then another. "And this one is coercive." I watched her, feeling something shift, fear turning into validation, confusion turning into certainty. After several minutes, she leaned back. "You need protection," she said. "Legal, financial, and emotional." I nodded, unable to speak. "We'll start by creating a structure they can't undermine," she said. "A private trust. You purchase the house, but your parents retain lifetime residency rights. They cannot refinance. They cannot borrow against it. They cannot add your name to anything again. And your sister?" She paused. "Your sister does not get access to anything." I exhaled slowly. It was the first time anyone had said out loud what I had begun to feel but didn't dare articulate. "And the debts?" I asked. "If you choose to pay them," she said, "we document every transaction, signed, notarized, no ambiguity, no guilt leveraged against you later." I stared at her, stunned by how simple she made it sound. Simple, not easy, but clear. "What about the loan application?" I asked quietly. "We'll put a fraud alert on your credit with all 3 bureaus, and a freeze. No one, not even you, can open new credit without unblocking it first." A freeze, a literal barrier between my identity and my family's access to it. Then she said something that felt like a door unlocking inside me. "You've spent your whole life making space for them. It's time to make space for yourself." I blinked hard, not trusting myself to respond. Nina folded her hands. "We start today," she said. "Now." She slid 3 forms toward me: credit freeze, fraud alert, trust initiation. I signed them one by one, each signature feeling less like a scribble and more like a reclamation. When I finished, Nina gathered everything into a single folder. "You're not alone anymore," she said. Those words nearly broke me. I thanked her, though the word felt too small for what she had done. Outside, the cold hit me immediately, the kind of chill that made my eyes sting. But for the first time, the cold didn't feel heavy. It felt clarifying. In the car, my phone buzzed. Another voicemail from Mom, her voice sharp, defensive, accusing. I didn't listen to the whole thing. I deleted it. I sat back in the driver's seat and closed my eyes. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Meetings, signatures, boundaries, consequences. But tonight, for the first time, I felt something close to peace. I wasn't the steady one anymore. I was the one setting the terms. The drive from Colorado Springs back to Missouri felt longer than usual, as if the winter roads stretched themselves just to make me sit with everything I now knew. Frost clung to the edges of the windshield, the sky a dull silver that made the whole world look tired. My hands stayed tight around the steering wheel no matter how many times I told myself to relax. Today wasn't about confrontation, not the loud kind. It was about truth, about finally putting everything on the table with no room left for excuses or guilt. When I turned onto my parents' street, the familiar houses looked small and worn, like they had shrunk in my absence. The old maple tree in front of their yard had lost most of its leaves, branches bare and skeletal against the sky. The garage door was cracked open a few inches. Through the sliver, I saw my father standing there, staring down at a stack of papers in his hands like they were a puzzle he couldn't solve. Seeing him like that, still frail without meaning to be, sent a strange ache through my chest. He looked up when my car pulled into the driveway, but he didn't wave. He just watched, expression unreadable. Mom opened the door before I even reached the steps, wiping her hands on a dish towel, though nothing in the kitchen smelled like it had been cooking. Her smile was quick, too quick, the kind she used when she wanted something to look normal. "Maya," she said, touching my arm lightly. "We're glad you're here." It was the same tone she used when she wanted to distract me as a child, too warm, too rehearsed. I stepped past her, feeling the familiar clutter pressing in from every angle. Papers, flyers, unopened envelopes. Years of chaos disguised as daily life. "Where's Scarlett?" I asked. "Out," Mom said immediately. "Yoga class." Of course she was. Before I could say anything else, a knock sounded at the door. Mom stiffened. Dad emerged from the garage, wiping his hands on his jacket. The knock came again. Firm, calm. Nina. Mom's face paled, confusion flashing into something firmer. "Why is a lawyer here?" "She's here for me," I said, keeping my voice steady. "And for you." Mom blinked rapidly. "This is a family matter. We don't need lawyers involved in our home." Dad said nothing, but I saw the way his jaw tensed. Nina stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. She was polite, composed, but her presence filled the room like a quiet alarm. Her notary followed behind her carrying a small briefcase. "Good morning," Nina said. "Let's sit." The living room felt smaller as everyone settled. Mom perched on the couch's edge, fingers knotted in her lap. Dad sat heavily in his recliner, eyes somewhere between me and the floor. Nina placed a folder on the coffee table, spreading out documents the way she had done in her office, methodically, with purpose. "I'm here," Nina began, "because there are matters of financial stability and asset protection that require immediate attention." Mom's head snapped up. "This is unnecessary. Scarlett said she was handling—" "Scarlett," Nina said evenly, "has been involved in activities that put this household in jeopardy." Mom's face flushed. "What are you talking about?" Nina pushed forward the refinance statement. "Your mortgage is behind." Mom's breath hitched. Dad stared harder at the carpet. "This is private," Mom whispered. "It became unsafe when signatures were falsified," Nina said. Dad jolted slightly, as if struck by a sound only he could hear. Mom shook her head. "We didn't want to worry her. Maya has her own life. She's always had more than—" "Mom," I said, my voice firm but calm. "I saved this house once already. I should have been told before you refinanced again, before payments were missed." Mom turned to me, eyes wet and wide. "We were trying not to burden you. Scarlett said she could manage it. She said—" "She didn't," I said. "She couldn't." Silence flooded the room. Nina slid forward another document, the credit application with my forged signature. Mom covered her mouth. Dad let out a sound somewhere between a groan and a sigh, something deep and tired. "This is identity fraud," Nina said. "Your daughter attempted to use Maya's credit without her consent. This is a serious legal offense." Mom swallowed hard. "It wasn't meant to be illegal. Scarlett was just overwhelmed. She said Maya always takes care of her. She said, That I would help, I finished for her. That I always would. Dad finally lifted his eyes. They were red. She told us you didn't need to know, he whispered. She said it would only upset you. Dad, I said softly, you should have told me. His face crumpled. Not loudly, just enough that I felt something tear inside me. Nina waited for the silence to settle before sliding one final document across the table. This is the trust agreement, she said. Maya is purchasing your home under a private trust. You will retain lifetime residency rights, but you will no longer be able to refinance, borrow against it, or use the property as collateral. Mom blinked. Our house belongs to her now? It always did, I said quietly. I saved it once. This time I'm protecting it. Mom took the paper with trembling hands. Dad stared at the second page, fingers hovering over the signature line. What does this mean for Scarlett? He asked, voice barely audible. It means, Nina said, she cannot access this asset, and she cannot use Maya's information to support her lifestyle. Mom flinched. She won't like this, she murmured. She doesn't have to, I replied. She just has to stop. Nina handed them pens. My parents exchanged a long look, fear, guilt, resignation blending into something heavier. Then Dad lifted the pen, exhaling as though the act itself cost him strength. Mom watched him and whispered, Are we doing the right thing? Dad nodded, though his hand shook. It's the only thing left to do. He signed. Mom followed, tears slipping down her cheeks. The notary stamped the pages, the sound crisp and final like a gavel. For a moment no one spoke. Then Mom wiped her face and said, barely audible, You didn't have to do this. I met her eyes. No, I said. I didn't. She lowered her gaze. I stood, feeling the weight in the room shift. The house was the same, but everything inside it had changed. Nina gathered the documents, packed them into her briefcase, and nodded for me to follow. When I stepped outside, the winter wind hit me like a wake-up call. Crisp, sharp, honest. Behind me, through the thin walls of the house, I heard Mom's voice. Low, urgent, frightened. She's really gone through with it. I told you she wouldn't hesitate. Dad's reply was softer, but I caught the words anyway. We can't keep doing this to her. I walked down the driveway, each step heavier than the last, but for the first time in my life I wasn't walking away to keep the peace. I was walking away because the truth finally had a place to stand. Scarlett showed up an hour after sunset, pounding on my apartment door with the kind of force that made the hinges shudder. 3 sharp knocks, perfectly spaced, perfectly intentional, the kind that told me she'd rehearsed them on the walk up. I had just sat down with a blanket and a cup of tea, hoping for one quiet evening after the chaos with my parents. The universe apparently had other plans. I stood frozen for a moment, the echo of her knocking spreading through the room like a warning. When I finally approached the door and looked through the peephole, my breath caught. She was soaked from the winter drizzle, mascara streaked down her cheeks, hair frizzy and sticking to her skin. But she wasn't crying from sadness. That much I knew. This was rage disguised as heartbreak. I opened the door a few inches. She didn't wait. She pushed it wider and stepped inside like she had every right to be there. You just ruined everything, she said, her voice trembling with the effort of keeping herself together. Do you have any idea what you've done to this family? I didn't move. I did what needed to be done. Scarlett laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. Needed? Really? You embarrassed us. You embarrassed Mom, and Dad can't even look at you after what you pulled. I let out a slow breath. Scarlett, they signed because they had no other choice. They were drowning. She glared. Because you made it look like that. You made it look worse than it was. I stepped back so she could pace, knowing she would anyway. She always needed room when she was spiraling, and she always assumed the world should expand to accommodate her. She started gesturing wildly. Mom called me sobbing, saying you showed up with a lawyer like we're criminals, like we're stupid. You forged my name, I said calmly. Scarlett froze. Then she turned, eyebrows knitting together as if she couldn't believe I would bring that up, as if it was the rude part of this conversation. Why are you even digging through my stuff? She snapped. Why are you trying to make me look bad? You used my identity to apply for a loan. She rolled her eyes and let out a scoff. I thought they wouldn't call you. They weren't supposed to. It was just supposed to go through. My heartbeat slowed to a cold thud. So you admit it. Scarlett folded her arms, shifting her weight from one foot to the other like a child caught lying but still determined to win the argument. You always make things dramatic. It wasn't fraud. It was a shortcut. I was going to pay it back. Scarlett, you wrote my name on a loan application. What do you think that is? She didn't answer. Her jaw clenched, her eyes darting around the room as if she could find a version of reality that suited her better. I told Mom you'd overreact, she muttered. That sentence hit like a slap. She said you'd help, Scarlett added. She said you always do. I felt something in my chest shift. Not break. Break implies it was whole to begin with. No, something unlatched. Something internal stopped pretending. I grabbed the folder I had placed deliberately on the entry table before she arrived. I'd known, somewhere inside, that she would come. I opened it and pulled out the loan application with the attempted signature. Is this your shortcut? Scarlett looked at the page, at the uneven imitation of my name, and the color drained from her face. For a moment she seemed small, like she wanted to shrink back into the version of herself she used as a shield. But then her chin lifted with practiced defiance. Mom said it would be okay. She said you wouldn't mind. I stared at her. I mind. Her eyes flickered. Surprise. Then insult. So what? You're punishing us now? Punishing me? You took the house. You trapped Mom and Dad with those stupid rules. You shut me out completely. I protected them, I said. I protected myself. Scarlett's lip trembled, but it wasn't from sorrow. It was frustration, the kind she used to mask the truth. You think you're so perfect, she hissed. You think you're the hero, but you ruined Christmas, and you made Mom cry for hours. A cruel little part of me wondered if Mom had cried because she lost access to my bank account. Scarlett stepped closer. If you undo the trust, we can fix this. We can pretend it didn't happen. No one has to know you went crazy and made everything legal. I stared at her. I didn't go crazy. I got clear. She blinked, not understanding. You don't want a sister, I said, my voice steady. You want access. She drew in a sharp breath. How dare you? You forged my name, Scarlett. That's not... You stole my information. It wasn't like that. You lied to Mom and Dad. She snapped her mouth shut, fury widening her eyes. You had me pushed out of Christmas so I wouldn't be around when the bank called, I said. Admit it. She looked away, jaw clenched so tight a muscle jumped in her cheek. Her silence was more honest than anything she'd said all night. A single tear slipped down her cheek, but even that felt weaponized. Mom will never forgive you for this. I felt the words rather than heard them, a tired, predictable threat. One Mom had used for years. One Scarlett had grown up mimicking. I'm not asking her to, I said quietly. Scarlett rubbed her sleeve across her eyes, pacing again. Then she stopped at the door, gripping the handle like she needed something solid before her world fell apart. You think you're free now? She spat. You think cutting us out makes you strong? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't move toward her. I didn't explain. I simply said, I finally understand where the door is. She stared at me for a long second, eyes burning, then yanked the door open. The hallway light framed her as she stepped out, leaving wet footprints on the floor. Merry Christmas, Maya, she said bitterly, and slammed the door behind her. The echo rattled the air. I stood in the quiet that followed, the kind of quiet that wasn't empty but clean, fresh, different. Scarlett was gone. But the damage she'd done, the truth she'd revealed, was still spreading through every corner of my life. And the next call I received wasn't from her. It was from a man saying he had found a box with my name on it, a box filled with things Scarlett never meant for me to see. The call came just after 9 the next morning, right as I was trying to convince myself to eat something. The phone buzzed across the counter, screen lighting up with an unfamiliar Missouri number. For a second, I considered letting it go to voicemail. Every call from Missouri lately had brought some new variation of disappointment, but something tugged at me, so I picked up. "Is this Maya Hartman?" a gravelly voice asked. "Yes," I said slowly. "This is Tom. I manage the Fairview Street storage warehouse. We've been clearing out a unit left behind after a property cleanup. I believe we found something with your name on it." My heartbeat stalled. "My name?" "Yes, ma'am. Written on the side of a box. Thought you might want to take a look before we toss anything." A chill crawled up the back of my neck. "Who rented the unit?" "Belonged to the previous homeowners," he said. "A couple named Hartman." My parents. I grabbed my coat before the call even ended. The drive to Fairview Street felt like sinking deeper into a story I hadn't meant to uncover. The warehouse sat behind a chain-link fence, rows of pale metal doors stretching across cracked pavement. Tom, a man in his 60s with a denim shirt and tired eyes, met me at the entrance and led me through the aisles. "This unit was emptied last week," he said as we walked. "Your parents told us most of it was junk." Of course they did. He stopped at a small open unit. Inside, a single cardboard box sat on a folding table, corners soft from age. My last name was scrawled across the top in thick black marker. Maya H. I didn't remember packing anything like this. I didn't remember ever storing anything here, which meant someone else had written my name. Tom folded his arms. "Didn't open it," he said. "Figured you should." My fingers trembled as I lifted the lid. Papers, not photos, not holiday decorations, not forgotten keepsakes. Papers, folders, receipts, statements, loose pages, spiral notebooks, all jumbled together as if someone had tried to hide them in a hurry. The first stack I pulled out was a bundle of receipts. Boutiques, salons, grocery stores, nearly all from places near Scarlett's apartment. Charges I didn't recognize. Some matched entries in my spreadsheet, some didn't. Then I found something worse. A half-completed loan application. The top portion filled out with Scarlett's handwriting, her bubble-like letters unmistakable. The guarantor section had my email, my old phone number, and my former address. The signature line was blank, but the margins were filled with shaky attempts at my name. Practice signatures, dozens of them. My stomach twisted. I reached deeper into the box and pulled out a spiral-bound notebook with a blue cover. The first page was titled Budget 2021-2023. Inside were lists of Scarlett's debts, credit card balances, due dates. Next to several entries she had written, "Ask Mom if Maya can help." Use Maya's credit? She won't say no if it's for them. Them, not Scarlett, them. Using my name on behalf of the family, as if my identity were a household resource. My eyes pricked with heat, but I kept turning pages, more scribbles, notes about which bills she planned to roll over, a reminder to call the bank, a line that stopped me cold. Keep Maya out of the loop until things settle. I swallowed hard. The notebook slipped in my hands. I picked up another stack of papers, this one in a neater pile, my mother's handwriting on the top page. List of bills Maya can cover if needed. Scarlett upset, avoid talking about finances. Maya will pay quietly, don't stress her. I felt the air leave my lungs. My mother had written an actual list of which responsibilities I would absorb, as if I were a safety plan, as if I were an institution. I kept reading anyway, even when it hurt. Near the bottom was a photocopy of my driver's license. Behind it, photocopies of forms with my information in the fields, applications that had been started but not submitted, or maybe they had been submitted and rejected. Then a loose sheet of notebook paper with Scarlett's handwriting again, but this time the letters were rushed, jagged. Get new phone. Maya's number might get flagged soon. Flagged. Because she knew what she was doing was illegal. Because she knew the loan attempts were catching up. Because she planned to try again. My hands felt cold, almost numb. Tom shifted awkwardly nearby. Didn't mean to pry, he said gently. Just thought someone should give it to you. There was a man here last week looking for it, but he didn't leave a number. I straightened. A man? Tom nodded. Younger, dark jacket, real agitated. Told us not to throw anything out. Said the box could ruin everything. A cold shiver spread through my spine. Scarlett didn't have a boyfriend last I knew, at least not one Mom had mentioned. But she lied easily, frequently. Did he say who he was? I asked. No name, Tom said. Just rushed off when I told him we weren't allowed to release anything without proper ID. For a moment, all I could do was grip the box's edges to steady myself. Someone else knew this box existed. Someone else was worried about what it contained. Someone else was trying to make sure I didn't see it. I gathered the papers back into the box, though my hands were still shaking too much to stack them neatly. When the lid finally slid back into place, I felt a strange, hollow steadiness settle into my ribs. This wasn't about missed payments anymore. This wasn't about Scarlett being irresponsible. This wasn't even about Christmas. This was about years of hidden choices, calculated ones, made behind my back. This was about a pattern designed to keep me in the dark and keep Scarlett afloat. This was about a family system that relied on me being quiet. Tom walked me to the car. He helped me lift the box into the trunk and wiped his palms on his jeans. Sometimes the things folks try hardest to hide are the things that need the most light, he said quietly. His words sank deeper than he probably meant them to. I thanked him, shut the trunk, and got into the car. The cold air bit the inside of my lungs as I exhaled. The box behind me felt like a weight on the entire vehicle, dragging all my years of quiet enabling into the present where they finally demanded attention. As I pulled out of the lot, the snow began falling again. Soft, silent, relentless. Everything I needed to see was in that box. And the first person I was going to show it to was Nina. The box sat in the passenger seat like a living thing, heavier than cardboard had any right to be. I pulled into the empty parking lot of a grocery store 2 miles from Nina's office and cut the engine, letting the silence swallow me. My hands were still trembling from the warehouse, from Tom's words, from the sight of my name written on applications I had never seen, never agreed to, never signed. The heater clicked softly. Outside, snow drifted in lazy spirals, gathering on the windshield in thin sheets. I rested my forehead against the steering wheel, breathing in through my nose, out through my mouth, the way I used to when Scarlett's meltdowns consumed entire rooms. Only this time, it was the truth consuming me. A loose piece of paper had slipped from the box when I carried it out of the warehouse. It lay on the seat beside me, Scarlett's jagged handwriting. Use Maya's credit. She won't say no. That single line hollowed out something inside me. I wasn't a sister to her. I was a resource, someone to borrow from, take from, drain without consequence. I picked up the page and shoved it back into the box. I couldn't sit here any longer. Nina needed to see all of it. The drive to her office felt dreamlike, my mind replaying scenes from years I hadn't realized were warning signs. Scarlett handing me my own credit card with a smirk. Mom insisting they had it handled while I covered another bill. Dad saying, "Don't worry your mother, she's stressed enough." How many times had they nudged me away from the truth? How many times had I obliged because I loved them? When I pulled up outside the Victorian office building, Nina was already at the door, as if she'd been watching for me. She didn't wave. She simply nodded once, calm and steady. "You brought it," she said when I stepped inside, her eyes landing on the box. "It's worse than I thought," I whispered. "I expected as much," she replied. She led me straight to the conference room. The long wooden table gleamed under soft lamplight. I set the box down, the thud echoing off the high ceiling. Nina pulled out a pair of glasses and motioned for me to sit. "Let's see what they've been keeping from you." My hands hovered over the lid for a moment. Opening it here felt like ripping the last curtain down, exposing everything, my family's manipulation, my own complicity, all the ways I'd been blind by choice or exhaustion. But I opened it anyway. Papers spilled out, receipts, statements, notebooks, applications. Nina began sorting in silence. She formed 3 piles with surgical precision. "Financial abuse," she said, patting the first pile. Receipts, withdrawals, transactions that made no sense for a household allegedly strapped for cash. "Identity misuse," she added, pressing her hand on the second. "Loan applications, the photocopy of my license, practice signatures, my email address scribbled in Scarlett's handwriting. And manipulation patterns," she finished, sliding the notebooks aside. "The lists Mom made, the notes Scarlett wrote, the reminders to keep me unaware." She tapped the third pile with her pen. "This is the part people underestimate the most." I swallowed. "The emotional part?" She nodded. "Manipulation is the foundation of every financial exploitation case I've ever handled, and this," she picked up the notebook where Scarlett had written, "Don't tell Maya until after the holidays," "is a blueprint." I felt sick. A shaky breath broke free from my chest. "What do I do now?" Nina didn't answer immediately. She picked up the photocopy of my driver's license, studying the faint bend in the laminated corner. "This wasn't found by accident. Someone put this in that unit." She selected the practice signatures. "She was preparing." I pressed my palms against my thighs. "I know." Then Nina looked at the loan application with my information scribbled in, and her expression hardened. "This is enough to file a police report." The room tilted slightly. The words "police report" echoed in a voice that could have been mine or someone else's. I imagined Scarlett in handcuffs, Mom crying and blaming me, Dad looking away like he always did when he couldn't handle the truth. "I'm not ready to do that," I said. "Not yet," Nina agreed, "but we're going to protect you whether you file or not." She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a stack of forms. "This is the freeze plan. We lock down every avenue your family has been using to siphon from your life." I stared at the stack. "What does that mean?" "It means after today they can't borrow against your name. They can't open credit. They can't refinance using your information. They can't access your financial accounts. Not 1 inch of your identity will be available to them." Her voice was calm, not cold, not angry, just factual, unshakable. I nodded slowly. "Tell me what to sign." We spent the next half hour working through everything. A fraud alert at all 3 credit bureaus. A full credit freeze. A request for documentation for every attempted credit pull made in the last 12 months. Then Nina opened a folder marked Trust Amendment. "Your parents' house will be sealed," she said. "No new liens, no refinancing, no access granted to anyone except the independent trustee we're appointing today." My stomach flipped. "Scarlett won't be able to touch it." "She won't be able to breathe near it," Nina said simply. "And if she tries, the trust locks automatically." For a moment I just sat there letting those words settle around me like a shield. Nina slid the amendment toward me. "Sign here." By the time I'd signed the last document, 10 pages later, my hand was shaking. Not from fear, but from the unfamiliar sensation of taking control. "You're reclaiming your life," Nina said, watching me carefully. "This is what that looks like." I exhaled slowly. "It feels strange." "It will get easier," she replied. "Boundaries always feel wrong to people who were trained to ignore them." Her words sank deep. "Now," she said, leaning back, "there's one more step." She handed me a blank sheet of paper. "Write a letter to the trustee, explain the pattern of abuse, list the attempts at fraud, and formally request that no member of your family be notified of changes unless legally required." I stared at the page. "What do I say?" "Facts," Nina said. "Only facts. Let the truth be enough. So I wrote, line after line, everything I had uncovered, everything they had done, everything I could no longer ignore. When I finished, Nina skimmed the letter and nodded. "This is the turning point," she said. I slid the letter into the file, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like the ground beneath me was unstable. I felt anchored. To myself, to the truth, to the life I finally had permission to protect. Outside, the sky had dimmed, clouds thick and low. I walked to my car with the wind cutting across my cheeks, but I didn't feel cold. My phone buzzed, a notification from Experian. Credit freeze active, another from Equifax, a third from TransUnion. All three, locked, protected, mine. I sat in the driver's seat, looking at the notifications glowing on my screen. For years, my life had been something other people borrowed from. Not anymore. The doors they had used, some quietly, some boldly, were closed now, sealed. And if anyone tried to push them open again, I would finally be on the other side. The apartment felt different when I walked inside that evening, as if something in the air had shifted without permission. For the first time in a long time, the silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like space, wide, untouched, waiting for me to step into it. I set my keys on the counter and realized I wasn't bracing myself for a voicemail, an emergency, or a request. My shoulders, so used to tightening, stayed loose. I turned on a single lamp in the living room, letting its warm glow settle into the corners. The string lights I never bothered to take down flickered softly against the window. I wasn't sure if I liked them or if they were simply familiar, but for the first time in days, they didn't feel like remnants of obligations I'd failed to meet. My phone buzzed on the table, 9 missed calls from Mom, another 3 from Dad, 2 texts from unknown numbers I didn't bother opening. When I played Mom's first voicemail, her voice was sharp, trembling with practiced distress. "Maya, your sister is devastated. You blindsided us. This is not how families handle things." I deleted it before she finished. The next voicemail was quieter, softer, meant to nudge instead of strike. "You didn't have to bring lawyers. Your father is anxious. Scarlett is sensitive. This is hurting everyone." Delete. Not once did she ask if I was okay. I placed the phone face down and walked to the kitchen, opening the fridge without really looking for anything. I wasn't hungry. I wasn't tired. I was simply still. And that stillness felt like oxygen. Something tugged at me, an old habit, and I reached for my planner. For years, my life had been a rotating calendar of family needs, medication reminders for Dad, dental appointments for Mom, rent deadlines for Scarlett. I flipped to next month and stared at the notes I had written weeks ago out of routine. Dad's cholesterol checkup, Mom's annual cleaning, Scarlett's lease renewal, a reminder to reorder supplements for Mom, a reminder to check Dad's mileage reimbursement. Every line was proof of a life spent holding up everyone else's. I clicked through each reminder and hit delete. Delete, delete, delete. Each click felt like peeling back another layer of expectation I had trapped myself under. I paused at the last one. Scarlett rent due. And for a moment, a memory flickered. Me wiring money at midnight 2 years ago because she'd forgotten again, and Mom begged me with that frail voice that always made me bend. I deleted it. The room felt lighter. I set the planner aside and walked toward my bookshelf, running my fingers over the spines. I couldn't remember the last time I'd read something just for myself. Everything these past years had been about managing, fixing, anticipating. I pulled out a random novel. Not because I intended to read it, but because I wanted to remember what it felt like to choose something without guilt. The phone buzzed again. This time it was Dad. His voicemail was slow, heavy. "Your mother is upset. Scarlett is... well, she's emotional. You didn't need to go to such extremes." I pressed delete as soon as the familiar guilt began to rise in my chest. Then I took a breath. A long one, a cleansing one. I wasn't required to absorb this anymore. The realization washed over me like warm water. I cooked dinner, not because anyone expected it, not because anyone needed me, not because I had to rush off to solve a crisis. I cooked because my body asked for something warm. Roasted vegetables, a slice of sourdough, a glass of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion. Tonight felt special enough. I ate slowly, tasting the food instead of swallowing between phone calls or guilt. The apartment was quiet, but it wasn't empty. It felt full of choice, full of breath, full of a life that had room for me now. After dinner, I cleaned the dishes methodically. It wasn't a chore, it was grounding. A way to claim space back inch by inch. Then another memory drifted up. Years ago at a Christmas party, I had excused myself from dinner because Mom whispered Scarlett had locked herself in the bathroom. I remembered standing in the hallway, coaxing my sister out while the turkey went cold and the guests exchanged awkward glances. When Scarlett finally came out, mascara streaked but dramatic as ever, Mom hugged her and whispered, "Thank goodness Maya's steady." They never asked if I was okay after missing my own meal. Tonight, I ate every bite. Later, I sorted through a drawer of paperwork, old receipts, notes, med lists I kept for my parents. I moved every document related to them into a box, not to throw away, just to set aside. I labeled it in thick black marker, "Not my responsibility anymore." The marker squeaked against the cardboard, the sound oddly satisfying. My phone buzzed again. A text this time, from Scarlett. "You destroyed Christmas and this family. Hope you're proud." Something inside me went quiet, then clearer. She didn't say sorry. She didn't admit what she'd done. She didn't ask if I was okay. Her pain wasn't grief, it was loss of access. I blocked her number. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Peace. The hours slipped by. I lit a candle, turned off the overhead lights, and let the soft flame cast shadows across the room. This quiet, this silence, wasn't the kind that came from abandonment. It was the kind that came from reclaiming space. My phone buzzed one last time around 10. I almost ignored it, but the transcription preview caught my eye. "Your mother asked me to check on you. She's worried how you might react." A woman's voice. Someone Mom knew but didn't want to talk to directly. Even now, even after everything, my mother wanted reassurance she wasn't the villain in her own story. She wanted to make sure I wasn't planning to do anything that required her to feel guilt. I stared at the message, the candle flickering beside me. They weren't worried about losing me. They were worried about losing what I provided. The truth landed softly this time. I put the phone down gently and walked to the window. Outside, snowflakes drifted in slow spirals, catching the light from the street lamps. The world looked quiet, clean. I whispered, almost without meaning to, "I'm finally free." And I was. I didn't respond to the voicemail. I didn't call back. I didn't explain myself or soften the edges or offer comfort where none had ever been given to me. For the first time in my life, I chose silence, not as a burden, but as a boundary. I curled up on the couch with the blanket still warm from earlier. The candle flickered one last time before steadying its flame. My breathing slowed. My body softened into the cushions. The quiet didn't scare me anymore. It felt like a doorway. And tomorrow, I would walk through it. The morning light wasn't bright, just soft enough to touch the edges of the apartment and remind me that the world hadn't ended, even if something inside me had. Or maybe something had begun. I stood by the window with a cup of tea warming my palms, watching the snow outside gather on the railing like a fresh layer of quiet. For the first time in my life, the silence didn't feel like anticipation. It felt like peace. No missed calls, no frantic texts, no guilt dripping through my notifications like it used to. Just stillness. I turned away from the window and began cleaning the apartment. Not out of obligation, not to make space for anyone else, but to make space for myself. I opened drawers I hadn't touched in years. pulling out stacks of old receipts, notes for my parents' appointments, grocery lists they'd sent, reminders I'd created to take care of things they forgot. One by one, I placed them into a large cardboard box. Every bill paid on their behalf. Every note I wrote to myself to check on Mom. Every printout of Scarlett's late payments I'd quietly covered. All the invisible labor of a lifetime. I sealed the box with a firm strip of tape and wrote on it in thick marker, "Not my responsibility anymore." It wasn't anger, it was clarity. A boundary drawn gently but unmistakably. As I tucked the box into the back of the closet, I found another envelope, one from years ago, yellowed at the edges, Scarlett's handwriting on the front. I hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a hospital bill from an ER visit years back, listed under primary contact. My name, my number, my address, another decision she'd made without asking. But instead of the familiar ache, I felt a strange lightness. Not because it didn't hurt anymore, but because I finally understood that the hurt wasn't my fault. I set the envelope aside and walked back into the kitchen, breathing in the warm scent of roasted garlic and thyme. I had started cooking without even realizing it, letting my hands move on instinct, chopping vegetables, rubbing herbs into a small chicken, preparing a meal that wasn't for a crowd, or for crisis management, or for someone else's preferences. It was just for me. I set the table slowly, intentionally, one plate, one fork, one linen napkin I rarely used. I poured a glass of red wine, watched the way the light caught in its surface, and for the first time in more than a decade, Christmas dinner didn't feel like performing. It felt like living. The first bite tasted like relief, warm, savory, grounding. I ate slowly, savoring each bite the way I had savored almost nothing in my adult life. No one called to interrupt. No one needed me to come rescue them. No one expected me to fix the holiday. When I finished eating, I washed the single plate by hand and dried it with the towel Mom embroidered for me when I'd first moved away. A small lump formed in my throat, but it wasn't grief. Not anymore. It was acceptance. I folded the towel neatly and placed it back in the drawer. Then I sat at the table again with 2 pieces of stationery. I took a deep breath and wrote. A letter to my parents, honest, steady, without blame. I love you. I always have. But I can't carry the weight you've placed on me anymore. I didn't leave the family. I simply stepped out of a role that was slowly breaking me. And one to Scarlett, shorter, simpler. I hope you learn to take responsibility someday. I'm choosing a different path now. One that doesn't hurt me to walk. I folded both letters and slipped them into an envelope I never intended to mail. Writing them wasn't about being heard. It was about letting go. The last light of the day faded into a soft gray. Snowflakes tapped gently at the window. The whole apartment hummed with a calm I didn't know how to name. I curled up on the couch with a blanket, letting the warmth cocoon me. My phone buzzed once, a holiday greeting from a coworker who barely knew me but cared more than most of my family ever had. The message made me smile in that small, quiet way you smile when something touches an old bruise gently instead of pressing on it. I whispered into the dim room, I'm finally okay. And for once, I believed it. I thought about everyone who had ever carried too much, ever been the steady one, ever been told to be quiet for the sake of keeping peace that never included them. I thought about how many people had learned to shrink themselves for family who didn't notice. This story wasn't just mine. It belonged to so many like me. If you've ever had to choose yourself for the first time, you know this feeling. The tremble of freedom, the ache of boundaries, the softness of peace you didn't know you deserved. Thank you for staying with me through all of it. If my story made you feel seen or gave you courage, I'd love if you shared your thoughts below. Tell me if you've ever had to set a boundary with someone you love. Tell me if you've ever reclaimed a part of your life you thought you'd lost. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, stories about healing, truth, courage, and the quiet power of choosing yourself, I'd be grateful if you stayed, liked, subscribed, or simply came back for the next one. After all, sometimes the bravest stories are the quiet ones we finally tell ourselves.